In this video, continuing with our guest network deployment, we'll be setting up a captive portal. So the captive portal is similar to the web authenticated portal that we use to filter based on the user's identity using active authentication. But captive portal pertains to using guest and temporary accounts. With the captive portal, before the user can access their allowed services, like the internet, for example, they must be authenticated through a custom web portal before being granted to those resources. So to set this up, we first need to go to the groups page, which is here under user and devices. And let's go to user groups. Here we will create a new group that will be dedicated for our guest users. So let's do a create new. We will first enter a name for this group. The type will be guest, which is important. For the guest accounts, we want them to use their email address for the username. We can also specify what the username will be, or we can auto-generate it. We're going to select email. For the password, it can automatically be created for us. We can either specify what that password should be, or we can disable the use of the password, but we will use auto-generate for the password. For the expired type, it can be immediately or it can be after first login. So immediately means that once the guest account is created on our firewall, it will expire in the next 4 hours or 4 minutes or 4 seconds. We can specify the particular duration. And this will happen whether they're logged in or not for choosing immediately for the expired type. Now there's also the option for having the account expire after the user first logs in, but we're going to set this for 4 hours. So once we create a guest account, then it will only be active for 4 hours. Next, we will enable the option for name, where we can enter the name of that user for reference. And let's go ahead and let's disable sponsor, and let's leave mail checked or email checked. So once we are finished, we'll go ahead and click on OK to save and create this group. Next, let's create a guest account, and we will do that by going to guest management, which is right here under user. And on this page, make sure that you have the guest group selected, which is reflected right up here. So this is the group that we created. So any account that we add or guest account that we add will pertain to this group. So that's important, especially if you have multiple guest groups created. So we'll go ahead and create a new account. Based on the details of how we created the group, we will enter the name of this guest user and followed by their email address, which they will use for logging in through the captive portal. You'll also see when this account will expire. And let's go ahead and add this account. So here on the summary page, we see our generated password, and we have the option of sending this information to this user's email address. Just go ahead and click here. Okay, so that has been sent, and we are redirected to a guest management page where we can manage active guest accounts that are created and has not yet expired. Okay, let's go ahead and go back and close this up. Our guest user will receive an email with their guest account details, keeping things nice and simple for our guest users and BYOD users for knowing exactly what to use for logging into the captive portal. For our next step, let's go back to the interface page on our FortiGate. Okay, and here we will go to the guest sub interface that we created in a different video. So select this and let's edit this. And here under security mode, we will enable captive portal, which is right here towards the bottom. Okay, so once we actually do that, we can select our guest group, which is based on our local accounts. And now we have the option of even customizing the HTML of the guest portal page and the different pages based on how the user will log in. So these are some of the different pages here that we can use. But we will go ahead and use the default captive portal pages in our environment. And once we are done, we will go ahead and save our changes to this sub interface. To test this out, let's go to a guest computer that's connected to our guest network. And let's do a continuous ping to our web server that exists on a different network. Okay, so we're not able to reach it until we log in through the captive portal. So let's open a web browser and let's enter the IP of that web server. Okay, and of course doing that will redirect us to the captive portal. So let's log in using our provided guest account. So that will be our email address for the username. And the auto-generated password. Okay, so now we're logged in, but we are not able to access that web server. Well, that is happening because we didn't configure any security policies. We just enabled the captive portal. So the policies need to be created. Therefore, let's go to the policy page. Let's create a new policy. And in this policy, any access from the guest sub interface, okay, talking to any device on our LAN, which is where our server farm exists, will be allowed if the source address comes from the guest network. So we need to go up here and create a new object that will contain the guest subnet. And let's enter the subnet and the mask. And say OK. And for the destination, we will select our user and server network group. This is right here. And of course, we will only allow it for HTTP and ping services. So our guest users can be able to ping and access any HTTP web interface that exists on the user or the server network. And of course, very important, we do not want NAT translations between our internal networks. And that is it. Now let's go ahead and let's add this new policy. With that policy created, let's go back to our computer, and now we're able to reach that web server, including its web page. So once again, it's important to also add the necessary policies, especially if you're connecting to different networks or on different interfaces on the firewall. We can monitor these connections and we can know who is logged in as a guest user by going to the firewall monitor page, which is right here. Let's go to firewall. And the first entry shows our guest account, the IP of our guest computer, including the volume of traffic so far for that computer. So very good information to validate exactly who's logged in as a guest user. And that concludes this video for how to set up and use the captive portal on the FortiGate.